Here holding Kuv Daled Amud Aleph by the Mishnah. Is continuing in the malacha of writing HaKoisev Shtei Oisiyos. One who wrote two letters, as we mentioned in the last Mishnah, and they were Behelem Echad. In between writing the two letters, he did not remember that it was Shabbos. He did not remember that it was not allowed, because if he would, according to some opinions at least, that would divide it and that would make that he's not chayav b'korban chatos, because he remembered in between. It's not in one mistake. It's not behelem echad. Fine, so it has to be in one mistake. Then the Gemara goes on in other details that you might have thought that would make him exempt, and he tells you that he's not exempt. Kosav b'diyoy. That's obvious. If he wrote it, whether it was with ink, black ink, or besam with yellow paint, besikra with red paint, bekumus with gum, with sap, or bekankantum. It had some name over there, I forgot what it was called, some sort of sulfur, some sort of, what it's called. There was a name for it. Some sort of sulfur. That makes it, it's a black type, they put it in today also into the ink that they use for Sefer Torahs. And it's a type of black ink. So these are different examples. Not necessarily these types, anything which leaves a mark, you're chayiv. There's no specific ingredient, specific material that would write. Anything that leaves a mark is fine. Then another thing that you might think would make someone exempt. Al shnei koisli zaviyos. If he doesn't write it on the same wall or on two boards, one next to the other, as you would think typically was in the Mishkan, but he wrote it on two walls which are next to each other in a corner of two walls. They joined by a corner. Or val shnei levachi pinkos, on two pages in a notebook. But it's two sides, like Amud Beis of Kuv Daled and Amud Aleph of Kuv Hey. It's two pages that you read them along together. They're not on Kuv Daled Amud Beis and then on I don't know what, and on Tzamach Daled Amud Beis. They're readable together. Yeah? So it's chayiv. Fine. Then another example. HaKoisev Al Bisori, when he writes with ink on his flesh, chayiv. Why not? We'll see soon, because it does fade away eventually. And the rule, as we'll see later, is that if you write something which fades away, you're not chayiv. It's isur only the rabbanon. But on your flesh, it is considered that it would stay, because if it would just stay the way it is, it would stay. Just the heat of your flesh, which makes it dissolve later on. So it's like an external thing which makes it fade away, and therefore you're chayiv. Hamisarit al psori, if he did not actually write on his flesh, rather he scratched, he did it just with scratching on his flesh. Rabbi Lezer mechayiv chatas, but Chachamim poitru. Chachamim say that he's poitru. Fine. Now, what's another example? Kosa b'mashkin. If he wrote with any liquid, b'mei peiros, with any juice, b'avak derachim, with dust, b'avak soifrim, with dust that goes around the quill from dry ink. Anything he could write with, but it won't last. You have fog on a window, and you write some letters in it. Anything like that, or you have some crumbs in your plate, and you make some letters in them. In all these cases, potter. It's midrabanan, it's a problem, it's not allowed, because it's similar to writing. But midiraisa, you're potter, you don't get a korban chatas, you don't have to bring a korban chatas for that. Another example, not that the actual writing doesn't last, but the form of writing wasn't a regular form. La'acha yodai, if he wrote it in the back of his hand, or beragli with his foot, bifi with his mouth, or peki with his elbow. So in those cases also he'll be potter, because it's not a regular form of writing. Or another example. We said earlier that two letters make you chayiv. What if I wrote only one letter, but there was already an existing letter from before? You had an aleph and you wrote a base next to it. So it writes a word now, but you only wrote one letter. Or uksav al gabi ksav, or kosav al gabi ksav. You had something written and you wrote again over the writing to make it stronger and brighter and clearer. Or niskavin lichtov ches. You're in the middle of writing a sefer Torah ches, you're supposed to have that hump in the middle to connect the two parts. And because of Beis Zainin, you didn't make that hump, so it turned into be two letters, two zayins, or by Arizal it's Vav Zayin. Okay, you have to know how to fit this with the Gemara over here, but you left the two zayinim. So you wrote two letters, but you never intended to. It's not like you wrote two letters of a full word and you intended to write those two letters. You never intended to write two zayins. Or another example, achas ba'oretz. You wrote two letters, one on the floor, v'achas ba'koyre, one on the ceiling. Or kosav al beis koisli abayis, on two walls of the house, but on two ends, two sides, not by a corner. Or al shnei dapei pinkos, on two pages of a notebook, ve'inegim zaim zetz. You can't read them together, so they'll never form a word, or they'll never be a match. Not like with the Mishkan, that they could be like a match. If it's by a corner, so in the Mishkan, they will make a letter by the corner beams to match them. So they're matchable. But if they're on two ends, they're not matchable. They don't help anything. If they're on the ceiling, on the floor, they're not matchable. Or if they're in two pages, they can't read them together. They're not readable together. So then put, what if kosav is achas nutrikun? If you wrote Rosh Tevis, you wrote red. You wrote a reish with a dash, yeah? Or you wrote, in those days you write like a meiser, they write a mem, and like a slash afterward, a dash afterwards. So I wrote a word, it's just a one-letter word. So what's the deal then? Yeah, because you wrote something meaningful. No, it's not a complete word, and although it symbolizes on a word, it's not a word. If it's not a word, then you're not chayav. Okay. So now the Gemara is going to translate the types of ink that were mentioned in the Mishnah from Hebrew to Aramaic. So it won't add much to us. Whatever we translated it will be here as well. But
Can I just ask a question? On the ink?
Yes.
In order to be considered writing al pidaraisa, you have to have ink. You say, writing on the window and so on and so forth is not deraisa. So do you have to have ink? The substance has to be some ink-like substance?
Anything which leaves a mark.
So a pencil would be prohibited, or pitora.
Yeah, because if you just leave it there, it's going to stay. Yeah.
Okay.
That's what he's going to say later on. He's going to bring that example.
Okay.
Okay. So dyoy is dyoisa, black ink. Sam is samo, yellow ink. Yellow paint. Sikra, Amar Rabba Baruchana, Sikanta Shema. That's the way it's called in Aramaic as well. It's red ink. Kumus, Kuma, gum, sap. Kankantum. Amar Rabba Baruchana Mar Shmuel Charta de Ushkafe. Literally, it means the black dye that the cobblers used to use. They would use it to paint shoes. But it was this substance made out of some sort of, if someone could offer the translation again, if that helps. I was trying to memorize the word, but I forgot. Some sort of sulfur.
Copper sulfate.
Sulfate.
Copper sulfate.
Copper sulfate. Yep. Right. It's made out of copper. Yeah, so they use it today in ink. So that in those days they would use it to dye shoes, but it leaves a mark. So you're chayav. Fine. Anything which leaves a mark. What are you coming to add? What would you think otherwise? And he has to add it in the Mishnah. Says the Gemara, if he wrote it with the water of Tario, so it could either mean with muddy rainwater that somehow leaves a mark, or a certain type of fruit that you soak it in water. It's called Tario, and again, it blackens. It makes it the black. It makes it dark. The Aftza, that's a type of sap, that's from some type of fruit. Nu, can you offer the translation? We had this in the past.
Coconut juice?
Yes. So this is a juice that makes things black. So also, you're also chayiv. Now, Rabbi Hanani wasn't talking about Shabbos. He was talking about writing a get. By writing a get or writing a Sefer Torah, you have to write with something which leaves a mark. So whatever is chayiv on Shabbos is what's kosher by a get. So he writes that if you use this meitaya or this absa, this coconut juice, kosher. That means that it's a type of ink which leaves a mark. Tani Rabbi Chia. Kosi ba'avor. If you wrote it with lead, like a pencil, b'shchor, with coals, with charcoal, or v'shichor. So shichor, there's different explanations over here. Some say it's exactly the same thing that we said earlier, this kankantum, this copper sulfate, or some say it's a different type of ingredient, but it's another thing which leaves a mark. Kosher also is a kosher for a get. Whatever leaves a mark is kosher for a get, and then you're chayiv on Shabbos. Fine. Then the Mishnah says that if someone scratches, carves, whatever, on his flesh, then he's potter. But Rabbi Lezer said he's chayiv. Tanya Omer Lam Rabbi Lezer lechachomim. V'haloi ben sitado. Now some say this ben sitado is Yoshke. Tosfos says, although we don't have the full Tosfos over here because the censorship that made a lot of things missing over here. In Gemara, in some places it mentions that there was someone called Yeshu, which lived in the time of Rabbi Yeshua ben Hananiah. Rabbi Yeshua ben Prachia, which was way before Rabbi Lezer, way before when the Christians say that Yoshke existed. And some actually claim, and that Tosfos is part of those opinions, that they're wrong. They have it all wrong. He was way before. They were trying to make him much later in order to claim that the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed because we didn't accept him. And really it was way before. Really was way before. So Tosfos said that this is not Yoshke. But some opinions would learn that this is Yoshke. And we'll see soon why he was called Ben Sitada. She says, "V'aloi ben Sitada, this Ben Sitada, hoitzik shofim mitzrayim, b'srita sha'al b'sor." He wanted to learn magic in order to show that he has power. And the place for magic was Egypt. So he went to Egypt, but they would never let them take out the secrets. So he couldn't write it down on a paper and take it with. They would check all his pockets. So in order to memorize it, he engraved it on his flesh. And that's how he was able to remember it, to scratch it. It wasn't like a tattoo. He just scratched it on his flesh. And that's how he remembered it. So we see that it's a normal thing. And then Amruloi, so they told him, Shoita hoya. He was a shoita. Now Rashi says really, it doesn't sound like he was a shoita. He was a shoita for this particular thing. In other words, he really wanted to get his message across and he really needed magic for that. So he acted in a illogical way, like in a serious nefesh way, in order to do something, but it's not normal. Since it's not a normal thing, you can't bring a proof from someone who's doing something abnormal. Now, there's a whole piece in the Gemara which is missing over here because of the censorship. So the newer Gemaras, they have it on the side. The Gemara asks, 1 second, why did he call him Ben Sitada? Since when is he Ben Sitada? Ben Pandira. So his mother was a soita, basically, someone who went with someone else. And the goy, that's according to this one, the goy that was with her was called Pandira. So the biological father of this person was Pandira, not Sitada. Why are you calling him Sitada? Amar Rav Chisda Baal Sitada, Boil Pandira. The husband of his mother was called Sitada. And the one who actually was with her and was the father of this child was called Pandira. He said, no, that's not true. Baal, Papas ben Yehuda. Her husband's name was Papas ben Yehuda. So it's not Sitada. Ela imay Sitada. His mother was Sitada. No way. Imay Miriam Gadlon Neshayav. His mother's name was Miriam, the one who used to make the braids for other women. So yeah. His mother's name was Miriam, but her nickname was Sitida. Why? She went off from her husband with someone else. That's why she was called Sitida. So his name was Ben Sitida, basically the mamzer. And he went to Mitzrayim to get his magic. And so that's, but basically he can't be any raya from here. That's why in Yiddish they used to call him Yoshke Pondrik, because his biological father's name was Pondira. That's they used to call him Pondrik. Okay, so that's all according to the opinion that this is actually Yoshke. According to Tosfos, it's not Yoshke. It's some other guy that was later on, and whatever. There wasn't only one mamzer around, and he also brought magic from Mitzrayim. Fine. Okay. So that's that. So that's what Rabbi Elazar brought a raya from him, that it's a thing to do, to scratch in your flesh, and I want to say you can't bring a raya from shaitan. If you added one letter to a written letter, you're potter. Man Tana, which Tana says our Mishnah, Omar Rove or Rabbi Baravuna, the Loik Rabbi Elazar is the ones who argue with Rabbi Elazar. We had earlier, or we're going to have later, regarding weaving. Weaving has to be two threads, and then you tie it to keep it straight. Only then you're chayiv for weaving. Rabbi Elazar says if you had already one thread woven, and you added one more, you're chayiv as well. So he holds that if you add one and it adds up to a shear, you're chayiv. So he would hold if you added the letter to a written letter, you'll be chayiv. But our Mishnah disagrees with that. Fine. Continues the Gemara. If you wrote over a written word, Man Tana, who's this Tana? The like Rabbi Yehuda, it does not fit with Rabbi Yehuda. If someone was needed to write Hashem's name in the Sefer Torah, he got confused in the pasuk, and he said, I guess Shema Hashem call Yehuda. So he thought that the first one was supposed to be Yehuda. So he started writing Yehuda, but he made a double mistake. He made a mistake on his mistake. He was supposed to write Yud Kivavke, but in his mind was reading the word Yehuda, but his eyes said one thing and his mind said a different thing, and he basically wrote Yud Kivavke, which is supposed to be Yud Kivavke, but his intention wasn't Yud Kivavke. His intention was Yehuda, which that's a problem, because every Shem Hashem has to be written Lishma. So what does he do? Not a big deal. Take the feather, dip it in the ink, and rewrite the same letters again on top of it. The Shema. Rabbi Yehuda. No. It doesn't look nice. It's not a proper way of writing a name on top of another name. It's not called writing. So if it's not called writing properly, you're not chayiv on Shabbos. Rabbi says it is called writing properly, so you're chayiv on Shabbos. So our Mishnah doesn't fit with Rabbi Yehuda. If he wrote a letter and it was the final letter of a full sefer of Tanakh, he wove one thread, it completed the entire clothing. Chayiv, here he is chayiv. Oh, says the Gemara, Mantana, who says this brayse? Amar Rabbi Elazar, this must be Rabbi Elazar. Dama that he says, even if you do one thread, but it's completing something, you're chayiv. The Gemara Rashi Amar, no. Afilu Rabbanon, lahashlim shiny. Rabbi Elazar says if you added one and it made up to two, you're chayiv. Here we're talking about you put one and it made something complete. Or you may then even Chacham will agree that he's chayiv, not just because of Makar B'Patish, but also for weaving, also for writing. If that was the Asura, they told him that he shouldn't write, that he shouldn't weave. It's considered writing and weaving because he did a complete thing, not just a complete shear. It's a complete thing, a complete clothing, a complete sefer. Then everyone agrees that he's chayiv. Fine. Amar Rabbi Yam. If one wrote one letter in Tveria on a sefer, and he wrote a different letter in Tzipori, on a piece of paper that could be put together with the original piece of paper. Two sticky notes. He wrote a letter on one sticky note over here and another sticky note over there, right? Chayiv. Although the Mishnah said that if I wrote it on the ceiling, on the floor, or on two opposite walls on potter, here he's chayiv. The Chodesh further, it's considered writing. You just have to put them together. You wrote two letters that are joinable. So the Gemara Batanan, if I wrote on two opposite walls, you cannot read them together, potter. So why here you can either read them together? Something's blocking you. You cannot put them together. Nothing's blocking you putting it together. Just put it together. Not a problem. And therefore he's chayiv. Fine. Tana, we learned in the Braise, if you fixed one letter, you're chayiv. So why? Hash the cost of Isachas Potter. If you wrote one letter, you're potter. If you just corrected it, chayiv. Chayiv. I'll tell you what it's talking about. You wrote by mistake a ches. It was supposed to be two zayins, or vav and a zayin, and you removed the hump, and now you have two letters. So you created two letters while you're fixing. So you fixed one letter, but you made it into two purposely. It's as if you wrote two letters. Therefore, you're chayiv. Rav Omar. I disagree with you. I could leave it at a simple pshat. He fixed one letter. Let's say there was a sefer that had a dalet in the wrong place. It was supposed to be a reish, and there was a dalet, and he scratched off the bit in the back, and he made it into a reish. So why is he chayiv? Similar to what we said before, you fixed the whole sefer. You have a sefer which is incorrect. You cannot leave it the way it is. You must fix it. And I fixed it. And as if I wrote the last letter in a sefer, here I corrected the mistaken letter in a sefer. I'm chayiv. Right? That's Rava's opinion. Okay. Tano niskaven lichtov oisachas. If someone intended to write one letter, and by mistake, it became two. As we said before, that he wrote by mistake two zayins, and he intended to write a ches. So the Mishnah said clearly that he's potter. So there are two braises talking about that. One braisa says chayiv, v'tnan potter. The Mishnah says potter. How do we fit the Mishnah which said potter to the braisa which says chayiv? Says the Gemara loy kashya had the boy ziyune had the loy boy ziyune. So the translation is in the Sefer Torah, a zayin needs tagim. Yeah. So if he still needs to or intends to write the tagim on the zayins, so he didn't finish yet. So what if he scratched off the hump? So what if you were writing a ches and it turned into two zayins? It's not complete two zayins. I have to put the tagim still, right? So therefore, I'm potter. But if you do not need to write make those tagim, why? Because let's say it's not a sefer Torah; it's a regular letter I'm writing to someone. So there, since I do not need to write the tagim, I'm finished. I intended to write a ches. I wrote two zayins, and it could be read as two zayins. So it's just like I wrote Shem from Shimon. I can just leave it the way it is, and it will mean something. So he's chayiv. However, if it's in a sefer Torah or in a place where it needs to have tagim, so even if it's right, I could leave it as two zayins. But I can't. I have to add still the tagim. And since I didn't put the tagim, I didn't complete the letter yet, and therefore I'm put. Okay, so to summarize, the Mishnah said that whichever type of ink you used to write, as long as it leaves a mark, then you're chayiv. So the Gemara says it means to say even lead or charcoal, anything which leaves a mark, you're chayiv. And the Mishnah then, the contrast to that is if you wrote with anything which does not leave a mark, with liquids that don't leave a mark, with dust, so it's only a Isur D'Rabbanan. However, if you write on your flesh, although it does fade away, it's considered something which leaves a mark, because if there wouldn't be the heat, your body heat, then it would have stayed. And therefore it's considered you did something which leaves a mark. That's that. Then the Tanakama said, the Chachamim said that if you scratch something on your flesh, it's your potter, because it's not considered writing. It's not a normal way of writing. Rabbi says he's chayiv because Ben Sidda did it. Says in order to bring the secrets of Mitzrayim, the magic of Mitzrayim. Says the Chacham, he wasn't a regular person. He did it he had an abnormal goal, so he acted in an abnormal way. But that's not a normal thing, and therefore it's not counted. Then we mentioned about where you write it. If you write it on two walls that are right next to each other, or on two pages that can be read together, then you're chayiv, because if you could read the two together, it's like a mark that can be read together. It's a word that can be read together. It's the way they did in the Mishkan. They would write letters on the corners in order to join them together. So you're chayiv. However, if it's on two opposite walls, on the roof or on the floor, then you're potter because it can't join together. However, you wrote on two pieces of paper, even if it's in two cities, but then you're chayiv because those two pieces of paper could be joined together. If you wrote in an unusual way, using the back of your hand or your foot or your mouth, like any other malacha done in an unusual way, it's potter. It's Isur D'Rabbanan with your potter. If someone intended to write a ches and he didn't finish the hump, he just left two zayins, and it can be read as two zayins. So it depends. If it's in a sefer which needs to have the tagim, then he's potter because he didn't finish it yet. If it's in a letter that doesn't need the tagim, then he's chayiv because he has two complete letters that could be read as a word. Zos is a word that could be read, and therefore he's chayiv. If someone wrote one letter next to an existing letter, the Tana of our Mishnah says he's potter. He didn't do a full shir. Rabbi Lezer says he's chayiv because he did something which adds up to a shir. If someone wrote on top of existing letters, he just like made them bold. So Rabbi Yehuda would say he's chayiv because he says that if you by mistake wrote a Yud Kei Vav Kei not intending l'shem Shemayim, l'shem Hashem's name, Shem the Kedusha, so you can just rewrite it the Shema on top of it. And Chacham say no, he can't. It has to be the original writing. So the same machlekes applies to Shabbos. Rabbi Yehuda says that he's chayiv for writing over other letters, just for like making the words a bit clearer. And Chacham says it's not called writing; he's potter. However, everyone agrees that if I wrote a letter that's the final letter of a full sefer, or if I wove a thread, which is the last thread of the whole clothing, I'm chayiv because that's something substantial, something significant, because it completes the whole sefer, or the whole clothing. Yeah. That's Rav Ashi's opinion. However, Rav Bar Huna says no. Even there, Chacham will argue and they say you didn't do a full shir, and therefore you pot. 1 second. Okay. Now, what if you wrote one letter, but it's a Rosh Tevis, and if you could read it as a full letter, Tanakama says, not Tanakama, Chacham says potter. Rabbi Shua Masechta says he's chayiv. What if it says in the Braisa that if I fixed one letter, then I'm chayiv. Fixed one letter, it's only one letter. So one opinion says, Rav Shesha says, you fixed one letter by turning it into two. And it was supposed to turn into two. Therefore you're chayiv. Another opinion says, no, fixing one letter in a sefer was written wrong and I scratched up the extra piece that they changed from a daled to a reish. I fixed the sefer. It's like completing the last letter in the sefer, and therefore I'm chayiv. That's the subject in this